talk about? They talk about whether or not I'm going to fire a police chief. That's what they talk about. And so the drama is that the mayor will fire the police chief, so he must be a bad administrator, a bad executive, because he's not holding him accountable. But at the same time, they know of facts that they could not draw that conclusion from. And those facts are, if it were not for this police chief, you would have no semblance of justice. Now, why is that? We had an incident that happened in East Cleveland, even though our officers were involved, which means that since it happened in East Cleveland, the criminal investigation is not with us, it's with East Cleveland, who does not have the capacity to handle it. So they called in BCI, Bureau of Criminal Investigation in Columbus, Attorney General. And to be perfectly honest with you, to make a long story short, he screwed it up. When you're an investigator, you're supposed to collect evidence, collect the facts, deal with the forensic, get statements from witnesses and all those relevant people involved so that you can try to recreate this picture as to what happened at that very moment. Because the fundamental question when a police officer is involved in a shooting, particularly that results in a death, the fundamental question is whether or not at that very moment a police officer was in fear of their life. That's the fundamental question. Fundamental. And since we cannot do the criminal side, because it didn't happen in Cleveland, the Attorney General was supposed to collect all this stuff and recreate that moment so that he can hand that over to the county prosecutor, and that county prosecutor, based on those facts and evidence and statements and the forensic, would be able to say there's probable cause whether or not to indict these individuals or not, based on that fundamental question where they had feared their life at that moment. All right? We, the city of Cleveland, are only responsible in this incident because if it happened in Cleveland, we do the criminal too, but since it did, we're only responsible here about the administrative side. And the fundamental question for us, Rabbi, is whether or not the police officers, in doing what they did not just the shooting part, but the entire chase and the beginning of the chase, whether or not they follow proper procedures and policy as clearly outlined by the Division of Police. That's the fundamental question for us. So, what happened was, the Attorney General called me just before he had his press conference, and you know what he told me? He told me that the police officers did nothing wrong. And not only didn't they do nothing wrong, but to him, that if he were the county prosecutor, he would not indict him. Now, is that his role? So from the beginning, you have a tainting of due process. Give me a little time. From the beginning. Well, like I said, have you heard what I'm telling you? Right, so I had to take the time. So from the beginning, you have a tainting of the process, which means you have tainted due process for the lawyers in here. And due process is designed to reach the proper conclusion and through a due process, so even if you don't agree with the outcome, you can rely on the process to accept the outcome, even though you may disagree with it. That's due process. That's the purpose for it. It's to ensure your rights and the protection of everybody under the Constitution. So in this case, the Attorney General has denied due process to both the two victims and the police officer, because there's no way in the world at the end of this situation that anybody's going to believe that whatever conclusion they reach, whether right or wrong, people are not going to accept it. They're not going to accept it. So to me, there's a systemic failure in the investigation because of this denial of due process and a bias in the tainting of that process. Now, what was the second thing that the Attorney General said? Not only would he not, the officer didn't do anything wrong, I don't know if I wasn't there. That's what he's supposed to collect the facts, prosecute the terms, not me or him. Not only did they do nothing wrong and he wouldn't indict them, he also said that the system failed the police officers. And that there was a systemic failure in the division of police and the system failed them. They did not fail the system. So if you follow those two things to its conclusion, not only are they not criminally liable, I am unable to hold them administratively responsible or accountable for what they've done. So what they do, walk. You follow me? Now, so when my police chief stood up and said, oh no, this is not a systemic failure in the police department because we train our people. They know what policies are. They know what procedures are. They're trained in it. Every year they get a retraining. It's just what we do. And we have general police orders that clearly define what you're supposed to do in a chase and a shooting. And we have tactics that we train them so as not to put themselves in a position they would have to use deadly force. We have all this. So we don't accept that they're not to be held accountable. We're going to hold them accountable. That's what caused the call for his firing. Because the police union said, we need to fire him. Plain Dealer said, we need to fire him. The police union, when asked the question as to why you want the chief fired, is it because he's trying to hold you accountable? They said, yes. And they said it on public radio. That they want him to be fired because he's going to hold them accountable. Right? Now, again, I don't know what happened. So I'm not trying to say the police officer is right or wrong. I just like to rely on something that a process that would allow me to accept the conclusion. Now, so what we've done, we have held administrative hearings for the supervisors first because, they're in charge. So I've fired supervisors as a result of this. I've demoted some as a result of this. And I've suspended others without pay as a result of this. Now we're in the process of reviewing all of those police officers that were involved in the chase to see if they follow policies and procedures in general police orders. Those hearings are over with. We provide due process. Those hearings are over with. And then the chief and the director will make a recommendation to me as to how to proceed, and I will follow the recommendation. Then the third thing that we'll do, when the criminal side is finally over, because the county prosecutor hasn't made his decision, but when that is over with, then those 13 or so police officers who actually did the shooting, we will put them under administrative review, and if they follow the rules, it's fine. If you're in the box, you're fine. You're outside the box, that's on you. Because it's clearly defined what general police orders are and what policies and procedures are. Now, have you heard any of this? So the point is, what am I going to do? I just gave an opportunity to set the record straight. Because I tell you, if you hadn't asked me, I wouldn't have done it because, but it demonstrates to me it's on your mind. And if it's on your mind, I have a right to address it because who you have relied on and those news outlets that you rely on to give you those facts, they're not going to do it. Then find the red light and I'll be quiet on this. I will tell you, if those two victims were dogs, if they were dogs, they'd have got better treatment. Shot 20-something times apiece. Apiece. If they were two dogs, they would have had more sympathy and more consideration, and people would have dealt with them differently, and I guarantee you they would have been provided more due process that they were two dogs. And that's what makes me mad.